There are moments in life when everything you believe to be true shatters in a single instant. For me, that moment came at exactly 12 minutes past midnight on New Year's Day, standing in my mother's living room, surrounded by the people I loved most in this world, watching 28 years of friendship reveal itself to be nothing but an elaborate lie. My name is Sophie Mitchell, and this is the story of how my childhood best friend systematically destroyed my family and how I made absolutely certain she faced every consequence she deserved. I need to take you back to the beginning to help you understand how deep this betrayal truly ran. I met Rachel Dawson on the first day of kindergarten in 1997. I was 5 years old, clutching my father's hand at the entrance of Maplewood Elementary in suburban Connecticut, terrified of the crowds of children running past me. Rachel was standing alone by the cubbies, a small girl with tangled brown hair and clothes that looked like they had been washed too many times. She was crying silently, and something in me, even at that young age, felt drawn to her sadness. I walked over and offered her half of my peanut butter sandwich. She looked at me with those big hazel eyes and smiled for the first time. From that moment forward, we were inseparable. What I did not know then was that Rachel's home life was nothing like mine. While I went home to a warm house with parents who adored me and a little brother who followed me everywhere, Rachel went home to chaos. Her biological mother had abandoned her when she was 3, and she had been placed with a foster family who saw her as nothing more than a monthly check from the state. She never talked about it, not really, but sometimes she would show up at school with bruises she claimed came from falling off her bike. Or she would flinch when adults raised their voices. My parents noticed. My mother especially noticed. By the time we were 8 years old, my parents had essentially adopted Rachel into our family without the paperwork. She spent more nights at our house than at her foster home. My mother made sure she had new clothes for school, helped her with homework, took her to dance classes alongside me. My father treated her like a second daughter, teaching her to ride a bike in our backyard, including her in every family vacation, every holiday celebration, every birthday party. When Rachel's foster family finally decided they did not want her anymore, and she entered the group home system at age 11, my parents fought to become her legal guardians. The process took 2 years, but by the time we were 13, Rachel Dawson officially became Rachel Hayes, my legal sister. I remember the day the adoption was finalized. We stood in the courtroom, and my mother was crying happy tears, and my father had his arms around both of us, and Rachel looked at me and whispered that she finally had a real family. I believed her. I believed that she loved us as much as we loved her. I believed that the bond we shared was unbreakable, forged in childhood innocence and strengthened by years of shared experiences. I believed that Rachel was my sister in every way that mattered. I was wrong about everything. Wrong about. The first sign that something was not right came when we were 17 years old, though I did not recognize it as a warning at the time. I had been dating a boy named Marcus for about 3 months, my first serious boyfriend. He was sweet and shy and wrote me terrible poetry that I pretended to love. One afternoon, I came home early from a dentist appointment and found Rachel in my bedroom, going through my things. She had my diary open on her lap, and she was reading it with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. When she saw me, she did not look embarrassed or apologetic. She simply closed the diary, set it down, and said she was looking for a hair tie. I believed her because I had no reason not to. Rachel was my sister, my best friend, the person I trusted more than anyone else in the world besides my parents. 2 weeks later, Marcus broke up with me. He said he had realized he had feelings for someone else, that someone else turned out to be Rachel. She came to me crying, saying she had not meant for it to happen, saying that she and Marcus had just started talking, and feelings had developed, and she was so sorry. She never wanted to hurt me. I forgave her because that is what sisters do. I swallowed my hurt and told her I understood, and watched them date for the next 4 months until Marcus moved away with his family. Rachel never mentioned him again after he left, and I convinced myself that it had all been innocent, just teenage drama, nothing more. But there were other moments over the years, small incidents that I filed away in the back of my mind without ever examining too closely. The time Rachel told my college roommate that I had been talking badly about her behind her back, which was completely untrue and nearly cost me that friendship. The way she would make subtle comments about my appearance, always phrased as compliments, but somehow leaving me feeling worse about myself. The job opportunity she forgot to tell me about, claiming the email must have gotten lost even though it was for a position at her company that would have been perfect for my career. The way she always seemed to be present during my lowest moments, but somehow absent during my highest ones. I married Daniel Mitchell when I was 27 years old. He was an architect with kind eyes and a quiet strength that made me feel safe in ways I'd never felt before. Rachel was my maid of honor, of course. She gave a beautiful speech at the reception about how I was the sister she had always dreamed of having, how our family had saved her life, how she could never repay the debt she owed to my parents for giving her a home. There were tears in everyone's eyes. My mother was beaming. My father, who would pass away from a heart attack just 2 years later, hugged Rachel and told her she had always been his daughter, blood or no blood. 3 months after my wedding, Daniel mentioned in passing that Rachel had been texting him. Nothing inappropriate, he assured me, just checking in, asking how married life was treating him, sending funny memes. I thought it was sweet that my sister and my husband were becoming friends. I encouraged it. When Rachel started showing up at our apartment unannounced, I welcomed her with open arms. When she began calling Daniel directly instead of going through me to make plans, I told myself I was being paranoid for feeling uncomfortable. When I found a birthday card she had given him that said she was so glad he was part of the family now, with 3 heart emojis after her signature, I convinced myself that it meant nothing. My father died on a Tuesday afternoon in March, 3 years before that fateful New Year's Eve. A massive heart attack at 61 years old. He was gone before the ambulance even arrived. The grief that consumed our family was overwhelming, all-encompassing, the kind of pain that makes you forget how to breathe. My mother was devastated. My brother James, who had always been particularly close to our father, withdrew into himself completely. And Rachel was there every single day, helping my mother with arrangements, cooking meals, handling phone calls from relatives. She was the picture of a devoted daughter, and I was grateful for her presence during the darkest time of our lives. What I did not know was that Rachel had been waiting for this moment. Not my father's death specifically, but the vulnerability that followed. The cracks in our family's foundation that she could begin to exploit. It started small, as these things always do. A few months after the funeral, my mother mentioned that Rachel had suggested she consider selling the family home. It was too big for one person, Rachel had said. Too many memories, too much upkeep. My mother was considering it, and Rachel had even connected her with a real estate agent, a friend of hers who could give my mother a good deal. I was surprised that Rachel had not mentioned any of this to me, but I assumed she was just trying to help and did not want to burden me while I was still processing my own grief. The house did not sell. My mother decided she was not ready to leave the home she had shared with my father for 30 years, and Rachel seemed to accept this decision gracefully. But I noticed that she began spending more time alone with my mother, taking her to lunch, helping her sort through my father's belongings, accompanying her to doctor's appointments that I did not even know were happening. When I asked my mother about it, she said Rachel had insisted on being more involved now that Dad was gone. She said Rachel wanted to make sure she was taken care of. I felt a small pang of guilt that I was not doing more, that Rachel was picking up the slack, that my sister was being a better daughter than I was. The guilt was intentional. I understand that now. A year after my father's death, my mother called me with exciting news. Rachel had convinced her to start investing some of the life insurance money rather than letting it sit in a savings account earning minimal interest. Rachel had a friend who was a financial advisor, someone who had helped Rachel herself build quite a nice little portfolio. My mother was going to meet with him the following week to discuss options. I asked my mother if she had talked to James about this, since he worked in finance and would certainly have opinions. She said Rachel had advised against it, that James was still struggling with his own issues after his divorce and did not need the added stress. She said Rachel had everything under control. I should have pressed harder. I should have insisted on being part of these conversations. I should have recognized the pattern forming right in front of my eyes. But I was busy with my own life, my own marriage, my own career. I trusted Rachel implicitly because I had been trusting her for nearly 3 decades. She was my sister. She would never do anything to hurt our mother. By the second anniversary of my father's death, My mother had invested nearly $400,000 with Rachel's financial advisor friend. The returns, according to the statements my mother showed me proudly, were exceptional. She was making money while she slept, she said. Rachel had really come through for her. I remember feeling proud of Rachel, too. Proud that she was using her connections to help our family. Proud that she had become such a successful and responsible adult after such a difficult childhood. James was the first to raise concerns. He called me one evening in October, about 2 months before that New Year's Eve, and asked if I had actually looked at the investment statements Mom was receiving. I admitted I had only glanced at them. He said something about them did not look right. The returns were too consistent, too high, too good to be true. He had tried to look into the financial advisor Rachel had recommended, a man named Gregory Sinclair, and could not find any legitimate credentials or licensing. He had tried to bring this up with Mom, but she had dismissed his concerns, saying that Rachel had assured her everything was legitimate and that James was just being paranoid because of what had happened with his ex-wife. I confronted Rachel about it the following week. I tried to be gentle, tried to frame it as curiosity rather than accusation. I asked her about Gregory Sinclair, about his qualifications, about the investment strategy he was using. Rachel's response was calm and measured and utterly convincing. She said Gregory was a private wealth manager who worked with a select clientele and did not advertise publicly. She said the returns were high because he used proprietary trading algorithms that most mainstream advisors did not have access to. She said she had been investing with him herself for years and had nothing but positive experiences. She said James was projecting his own issues onto the situation because his ex-wife had cleaned him out in the divorce and he did not trust anyone anymore. She said she was hurt that I would question her motives when all she had ever done was try to help our family. I apologized. I actually apologized to her for doubting her. I told James to back off and give Rachel the benefit of the doubt. I defended her to my mother, smoothing over any lingering tension from James's accusations. I did exactly what Rachel wanted me to do, and I did it willingly because I could not conceive of a reality in which my sister, my best friend, the girl I had shared a peanut butter sandwich with on the first day of kindergarten, would deliberately harm the family that had saved her. November passed uneventfully. Rachel was around constantly, helping my mother prepare for the holidays, organizing a memorial dinner for my father's birthday, generally being the perfect daughter. She and Daniel seemed to be getting along well, often texting and occasionally meeting for coffee when Rachel was in the city for work. I was busy with a major project at my marketing firm and grateful that Rachel was keeping Daniel company when I could not. I trusted them both completely. The week before Christmas, my mother called me crying. She had received a letter from the State Securities Board informing her that Gregory Sinclair was under investigation for operating an unlicensed investment scheme. The letter advised her to contact a lawyer immediately regarding any money she had invested with him. My mother was confused and frightened and asking me what this meant, whether her money was safe, whether Rachel knew about this. I told her to stay calm, that there had to be some explanation, that I would get to the bottom of it. I called Rachel immediately. She did not answer. I texted her, no response. I called her office and was told she had taken a personal day. I drove to her apartment and knocked on her door for 10 minutes with no answer. I was starting to panic, not because I suspected her of anything, but because I was worried something had happened to her. Maybe Gregory Sinclair had done something to her, too. Maybe she was a victim, just like my mother. That night, James called me with news that turned my blood to ice. He had done some digging, called in some favors from colleagues in the financial sector, and discovered something that I still struggle to process even now. Gregory Sinclair was not a real person. The name was an alias, one of several used by a man named Marcus Webb, who had a history of running investment scams targeting elderly and vulnerable people. James had managed to obtain photographs and had shown them to a contact who had dealt with Webb before. Marcus Webb and Rachel's boyfriend, the man she had been dating for the past 3 years, the man she had introduced to our family at countless dinners and holidays, were the same person. I did not believe it at first. I could not believe it. There had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding, some explanation that would make everything make sense. Rachel could not have knowingly introduced a con artist to our mother. Rachel could not have deliberately helped someone steal $400,000 from the woman who had raised her, loved her, given her a home and a family and a future. Rachel was my sister. Rachel loved us. I needed to hear it from her directly. I needed her to explain, to defend herself, to tell me that she had been deceived just like my mother had been deceived. I spent 3 days trying to reach her before she finally responded to one of my texts with a simple message. I will explain everything at Mom's New Year's Eve party. Please trust me until then. I should not have waited. I should have gone to the police immediately, should have warned my mother, should have done something other than cling to the desperate hope that there was an innocent explanation. But I could not bring myself to accuse Rachel of something so monstrous without giving her a chance to defend herself. 28 years of friendship, 20 years of sisterhood, a lifetime of memories and love and trust, surely that counted for something. New Year's Eve arrived with a cold clarity that I will never forget. My mother's house was decorated beautifully, the way it always was for holidays. There was a tree in the corner still up from Christmas, lights twinkling in the windows, the smell of her famous beef stew simmering in the kitchen. James was there with a new girlfriend, a quiet woman named Elena who seemed uncomfortable with the tension she could sense beneath the surface. Daniel was beside me, holding my hand, unaware of what I knew, unaware of what was about to happen. And Rachel was there, beautiful and poised in a red dress, greeting everyone with hugs and smiles as if nothing was wrong. I watched her all evening, studying her face for any sign of guilt or discomfort. There was none. She laughed at my mother's jokes, complimented Elena's earrings, poured champagne for everyone as midnight approached. She was the perfect picture of a loving daughter, a devoted sister, a cherished member of the family. And all I could think about was the $400,000 that was gone. My mother's retirement fund, my father's legacy, stolen by a man that Rachel had brought into our lives. At 11:45, Rachel asked if she could say a few words before midnight. My mother beamed and said, "Of course," expecting some heartfelt toast about family and gratitude and new beginnings. We all gathered in the living room, champagne glasses in hand, waiting for Rachel to speak. What happened next will haunt me for the rest of my life. Rachel cleared her throat and looked directly at my mother. She said that before the new year began, she needed to clear the air about some things. She said that she knew everyone had questions about the investment situation, and she was ready to provide answers. My mother's smile faltered. James set down his champagne glass. Daniel squeezed my hand tighter. Rachel said that Gregory Sinclair, or Marcus Webb, or whatever name he was using, had disappeared 3 days ago. He had taken all of the invested money with him, not just my mother's $400,000, but funds from dozens of other victims as well. The total was estimated to be somewhere around $12 million. He was probably already in another country by now, somewhere without extradition treaties, living comfortably on other people's retirement savings. My mother let out a small sound, like a wounded animal. James started to say something, his face red with anger, but Rachel held up a hand to silence him. She was not finished. Rachel said that she had known from the beginning. She had known that Marcus was a con artist. She had known that the investment scheme was fraudulent. She had helped him identify my mother as a target, had exploited the trust our family had in her, had deliberately steered my mother toward financial ruin. She had done it willingly, knowingly, with full understanding of the consequences. The room went completely silent. I could hear the clock on the mantel ticking, counting down the seconds to midnight. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I could not move, could not speak, could not process what I was hearing. My mother asked why. It was barely a whisper, but in the silence it sounded like a scream. Rachel's answer was calm, measured, almost rehearsed. She said that for 20 years she had lived in this family feeling like a charity case, a project, a good deed that my parents could pat themselves on the back for. She said that no matter how hard she tried, she was always the adopted one, always the outsider, always second best compared to their real children. She said that my parents had never let her forget where she came from, never let her forget that she owed them everything, never let her be an equal member of the family. This was a lie, an absolute, categorical lie. My parents had loved Rachel as their own. They had never once made her feel less than, had never once reminded her of her origins, had never once treated her differently than they treated me or James. But as I looked at Rachel's face, I realized something that chilled me to my core. She believed it. She had convinced herself of a narrative that did not exist, had rewritten our entire family history in her mind to cast herself as the victim and us as her oppressors. Every act of love and generosity had been twisted into evidence of condescension. Every moment of inclusion had been interpreted as a reminder of her status as an outsider. She had been carrying this resentment for decades, nurturing it in secret, waiting for the perfect opportunity to make us pay for crimes we had never committed. James stepped forward, his fists clenched, and demanded to know what she had gotten out of this. Was it just the satisfaction of hurting us, or had there been something more tangible involved? Rachel smiled, a cold expression that I had never seen on her face before. She said that Marcus had promised her 20% of everything they took. That came out to roughly $80,000 from my mother's investment alone. Combined with her cut from the other victims, she stood to receive over $2 million once Marcus transferred her share. Daniel spoke for the first time, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. He asked if everything between them had been a lie, too. The friendship, the texts, the coffee meetings. Had she been playing him this whole time? Rachel turned to look at him and something shifted in her expression. She said that Daniel had been an unexpected bonus. She said she had enjoyed getting close to him, had enjoyed knowing that she could take him from me whenever she wanted. She said she had been laying the groundwork for months, building an emotional connection, waiting for the right moment to make her move. She said she had planned to seduce him after the money was gone, to take my husband along with my mother's savings to leave me with nothing. I heard Daniel make a sound of disgust beside me, felt him pull away from me slightly as if the mere suggestion of involvement with Rachel had contaminated him. But I could not focus on that right now. All I could see was Rachel's face, the face of the girl I had shared my lunch with 30 years ago, the face of the sister I had loved and trusted and defended against everyone who had ever doubted her. The clock struck midnight. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks began to explode, celebrating the arrival of a new year. In my mother's living room, no one moved. Rachel picked up her purse and said she thought that was everything. She thanked us for the memories and wished us luck with the new year. Then she walked toward the door as if she had simply announced she was going to grab more champagne from the kitchen. James blocked her path. He said she was not going anywhere, that he was calling the police, that she was going to prison for what she had done. Rachel laughed and said he could try, but Marcus had been careful, had structured everything to shield her from legal liability. She was just a family member who had made an innocent referral to a financial advisor. There was no paper trail connecting her to the scheme, no evidence that she had known about the fraud, nothing that would hold up in court. It would be her word against ours, and who would believe that a loving adopted daughter would deliberately destroy the family that had raised her? She was right, and she knew it. James called the police anyway, but when they arrived, Rachel gave a convincing performance as a shocked and devastated family member who had been deceived just like everyone else. She cried. She apologized profusely. She expressed horror at the revelation that her boyfriend had been a con artist. Without concrete evidence of her involvement, the police could only take statements and promise to investigate. Rachel left my mother's house that night a free woman. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. My mother fell into a deep depression, unable to accept that the daughter she had loved and raised had betrayed her so completely. She blamed herself, wondered what she had done wrong, questioned every interaction she had ever had with Rachel. James was consumed by rage, spending every waking hour trying to build a case against Rachel, running into dead end after dead end. Daniel and I barely spoke, the revelation of Rachel's attempted seduction hanging between us like a toxic cloud, even though nothing had actually happened. I could not eat. I could not sleep. I could not stop replaying every moment of my 32 years with Rachel, searching for signs I had missed, warnings I had ignored, evidence of the monster hiding beneath the surface of my sister. I found plenty in retrospect. The manipulation, the lies, the subtle ways she had positioned herself at the center of our family, while simultaneously resenting us for welcoming her there. It had all been there, right in front of my eyes, and I had refused to see it. But beneath the grief and the shock and the devastation, something else was growing. Something cold and hard and determined. Rage. Rachel had taken my mother's money, destroyed my family's peace, and tried to steal my husband. She had done it all with calculation and cruelty and not an ounce of remorse. And she had walked away believing that she had won, that she was untouchable, that we were powerless to do anything about it. She was wrong. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything I could remember about Rachel's behavior over the years. Every lie she had told, every person she had manipulated, every inconsistency in her stories. I reached out to old friends from high school and college, people who had drifted away from both of us, and asked if they had ever noticed anything strange about Rachel. The answers I received painted a picture of someone I had never truly known. My college roommate, the one Rachel had almost turned against me, admitted that she had always found Rachel unsettling. There was something off about the way she looked at me, she said, something hungry and resentful beneath the surface of her smile. She had tried to warn me once, years ago, but I had defended Rachel so fiercely that she had decided to keep her concerns to herself. Marcus's ex-girlfriend from high school, the one Rachel had stolen him from all those years ago, told me that Rachel had done more than just develop feelings for him. She had orchestrated the entire situation, telling Marcus that I had been cheating on him, that I had been saying terrible things about him behind his back. He had broken up with me based entirely on lies that Rachel had fed him. When I tracked Marcus down through social media and asked him about it, he confirmed everything. He said he had felt guilty about it for years, had wanted to reach out and apologize, but had been too ashamed. I discovered that Rachel had been fired from her first job out of college for falsifying expense reports. The company had chosen not to press charges in exchange for her quiet resignation, so there was no public record of it. I found out that she had borrowed money from at least 3 different family friends over the years, money that she had never paid back, and that she had always claimed was for emergencies that had never existed. I learned that she had spread rumors about me at my own wedding, telling some of Daniel's relatives that I had a history of infidelity that could make the marriage rocky. With every new piece of information, the picture became clearer. Rachel had been playing a long game for years, building her reputation as the devoted daughter and sister while secretly undermining me and anyone else who got close to me. She had been patient and methodical and terrifyingly good at it. The New Year's Eve revelation was not the beginning of her betrayal. It was merely the climax of a campaign that had been ongoing for most of our lives. But I was building a picture of my own, a case, a weapon. 3 months after New Year's Eve, I finally caught a break. One of James's contacts in the financial sector reached out with information about Marcus Webb. He had surfaced briefly in the Cayman Islands, accessing one of his offshore accounts before disappearing again. More importantly, there had been a second person on the account, a woman who matched Rachel's description. It was not much, but it was something. Evidence that Rachel's connection to Marcus went beyond being his innocent girlfriend. Evidence that she had been directly involved in the financial structure of the scheme. Evidence that she had lied to the police. I took everything I had gathered to a lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in fraud cases. She reviewed my documentation, listened to my story, and told me that while building a criminal case would be difficult, there might be another avenue for justice: civil court. If we could demonstrate that Rachel had been unjustly enriched through her involvement in the fraud, we could potentially recover some of the money through a lawsuit. It would be expensive, time-consuming, and uncertain, but it was a path forward. I told Patricia to do whatever it took. The lawsuit was filed in April. Rachel was served with papers at her new apartment in Boston, where she had relocated after New Year's Eve. I was not present for the moment, but James was. He had driven to Boston specifically to witness her reaction. He told me later that the color had drained from her face when she realized what she was holding, that for a brief moment, he had seen fear in her eyes. Good. Rachel hired her own lawyer, an expensive one, which told me that she had indeed received some money from Marcus. The legal battle that followed was brutal. Discovery requests flew back and forth. Depositions were scheduled and rescheduled. Every document in Rachel's life was subpoenaed and examined. She fought us at every turn, claiming that she was a victim too, that she had been manipulated by Marcus just like everyone else, that the lawsuit was just her vindictive family trying to punish her for falling in love with the wrong man. But the evidence told a different story. Emails recovered from her laptop showed that she had been communicating with Marcus for over a year before she introduced him to our family. Bank records showed transfers to her personal account that coincided with the timing of new investments in the scheme. Most damning of all, we found a draft of a document on her computer, a list of potential targets among our family's social circle, with notes about each person's financial situation and emotional vulnerabilities. My mother's entry had been highlighted, with annotations about her grief over my father's death, her trust in Rachel, her unfamiliarity with financial matters. Rachel had planned everything. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat in that courtroom every single day, watching Rachel squirm as her lies were exposed one by one. I watched her try to charm the jury with the same act she had used on my family for decades, and I watched them see through it. I watched her break down in fake tears when the evidence became overwhelming, and I watched the jury exchange glances of disgust at her performance. The verdict was everything I had hoped for and more. Rachel was found liable for fraud and unjust enrichment. She was ordered to pay restitution of $350,000, the amount proven to have been transferred to accounts she controlled. She was also ordered to pay our legal fees, which had been substantial. But that was not the real victory. The real victory was what happened after the verdict. The local news had been covering the trial initially as a human interest story about an adopted daughter who had betrayed her family, but increasingly as a cautionary tale about investment fraud. When the verdict came down, it made the evening news. Rachel's face was broadcast across Connecticut and beyond, identified as a convicted fraudster. Within a week, Rachel's employer discovered what their marketing director had been up to in her personal life. She was terminated immediately, her severance withheld, pending an internal investigation into whether she had used company resources in her schemes. Within a month, her landlord in Boston chose not to renew her lease. Apparently, other tenants had complained about media inquiries and did not want a known fraudster living in their building. The online community did the rest. Someone created a website documenting Rachel's history of manipulation, gathering testimonials from people she had wronged over the years. It became the first result when anyone searched her name. Her social media accounts were flooded with messages from people who had known her, accusing her of things I'd never even discovered. Apparently, her betrayal of my family was just the most dramatic example of a pattern that stretched back decades. Marcus Webb was eventually tracked down in Thailand by international authorities working with the FBI. He was extradited, tried, and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. He testified that Rachel had been a willing and enthusiastic participant in his schemes, that she had approached him through mutual criminal contacts after identifying him as someone who could help her accomplish her goals, that the entire relationship had been a business arrangement from the beginning. His testimony was not part of our civil case, but it was reported in the news, further cementing Rachel's public reputation as a calculating criminal. As for the money, Rachel did not have $350,000 to pay us. Whatever she had received from Marcus, she had spent or hidden. The judgment became a lien against any assets she might acquire in the future. It would follow her for the rest of her life, preventing her from ever accumulating wealth without paying what she owed. My mother never fully recovered from the betrayal. The money was gone and no verdict could bring it back. But something changed in her after Rachel was publicly exposed. The guilt and self-blame that had been consuming her began to ease. She stopped asking what she had done wrong and started to accept that some people are simply incapable of receiving love without resenting it. She sold the family house eventually, not because she had to, but because she wanted a fresh start and moved into a cozy condo near James. She sees a therapist now, something she never would have considered before, and is slowly learning to trust again. Daniel and I grew closer through the ordeal. The revelation of Rachel's attempted seduction, rather than driving us apart, showed me how steadfast he truly was. He had never entertained Rachel's advances, had always felt uncomfortable around her, had simply been too polite to say anything when she pushed boundaries. He supported me through every moment of the investigation and the trial, held me when I cried, and celebrated with me when justice was finally served. We are talking about having children now, something I was not sure I wanted before, and I find myself looking forward to the future in ways I had not thought possible a year ago. James found closure in a different way. The analytical part of his brain, the part that needed to understand how this had happened, was satisfied by uncovering the full scope of Rachel's deception. He compiled everything into a comprehensive document, partly as evidence for the trial, but also as a way of processing the betrayal. He met Elena, his now girlfriend, during one of the darkest periods of his investigation, and she provided a reminder that good people exist, that trust is not always misplaced, that one person's evil does not define the entire world. And Rachel, the girl who had been my best friend, my sister, my closest confidant for nearly 3 decades, is gone from our lives forever. The last I heard, she was living in a small town in Ohio, working at a retail store under her birth name of Rachel Dawson, trying to escape the reputation that follows her everywhere she goes. She attempted to contact my mother once, about 6 months after the trial, claiming she wanted to apologize and make amends. My mother did not respond. Neither did I when Rachel reached out to me a few weeks later with a lengthy email explaining that she had been in therapy, had come to understand the roots of her resentment, and wanted a chance to repair our relationship. I read the email carefully, analyzing every word the way I had learned to analyze everything Rachel said or did. And what I found was familiar. The same manipulation, repackaged as self-awareness. The same victimhood, dressed up as accountability. The same hunger for access to our family, now framed as a desire for reconciliation. I deleted the email without responding. Some people might say that I should have given her a chance, that everyone deserves forgiveness, that holding on to anger only hurts myself, that the person Rachel was does not have to be the person she becomes. I understand those arguments. I have considered them carefully, but I also understand something else. Some betrayals are too deep to heal. Some trust, once broken, can never be rebuilt. Some people show you exactly who they are, and the kindest thing you can do for yourself is believe them. Rachel showed me who she was over the course of 32 years. She showed me through small acts of sabotage that I dismissed as accidents. She showed me through relationships she destroyed that I convinced myself were coincidences. She showed me through the calculated, methodical destruction of my family that she unveiled with pride on New Year's Eve. She showed me that beneath the surface of the sister I loved was a person capable of extraordinary cruelty, someone who had spent decades pretending to be part of our family while secretly despising us for taking her in. I believe her now. The revenge I sought was not dramatic. I did not confront Rachel in public, did not scream at her, did not fantasize about violence or destruction. The revenge I sought was something more lasting. It was the complete and total exposure of who she really was. It was ensuring that she could never again hide behind the mask of the loving daughter and sister. It was making sure that the rest of her life would be lived in the shadow of her own choices, unable to escape the consequences of what she had done. Some might call that justice rather than revenge. Perhaps they are right. But in the quiet moments when I think about everything Rachel took from us and everything she tried to take, I know that what I felt driving me forward was not a dispassionate desire for fairness. It was something hotter, something more personal. It was the need to make her pay, to watch her carefully constructed life crumble the way she had tried to make ours crumble, and I am not ashamed of that. New Year's Eve has a different meaning for me now. It is no longer just a celebration of new beginnings, but a reminder of the night everything changed. Each year, as the clock approaches midnight, I think about who I was before I knew the truth about Rachel and who I have become since. I think about the naive trust I placed in someone who never deserved it and the hard-won wisdom I gained from having that trust destroyed. This past New Year's Eve, I stood with Daniel in our backyard, watching fireworks paint the sky, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Peace. Not the absence of pain, because the scars Rachel left will never fully heal, but a deep, settled acceptance that I survived the worst thing someone could do to me, that I fought back, that I won. My mother is rebuilding her life. My brother has found happiness. My marriage is stronger than ever, and Rachel, the girl who thought she could destroy us and walk away untouched, lives every day with the knowledge that she failed, that we refused to be her victims, that we turned her carefully planned betrayal into the instrument of her own downfall. If you are reading this, if you have someone in your life who seems too good to be true, who seems to love you while subtly undermining you, who takes and takes while making you feel guilty for noticing, trust your instincts. The signs are there if you are willing to see them. Do not wait, as I did, for the mask to slip completely. Do not give them decades to burrow into your life and plant the seeds of your destruction. And if you have already been betrayed, if someone close to you has already revealed themselves to be your enemy, know this. You are not powerless. You are not alone. The truth is your weapon, and patience is your ally. Build your case, gather your evidence, wait for your moment, then strike. Rachel thought she knew me. She thought I was the same naive, trusting girl who had shared her sandwich on the first day of kindergarten, who had defended her against anyone who doubted her, who had believed in the fiction of sisterhood she had performed for nearly 30 years. She was wrong about me, too. I am Sophie Mitchell. I am a survivor. I am proof that even the deepest betrayal can be overcome, that even the most careful enemy can be defeated, that even the longest game can be won by someone with enough determination to play it. This is my story. This is my truth. And this is my victory. Happy New Year.